I would like to present you an artist that we had the pleasure to also have as a musician do a set in 2019. It was like a very big event that we did with Data Natives, and yeah, it was like a really, really nice set. Portrait XO. She's been here for some time and as an AI musician, and lately she's also been very outspoken about these topics that we're actually discussing today. So I think she would be the perfect person to close this. So please give Portrait XO or Rania a round of applause.
Ooh. Oh, that's really loud. I don't know how to. Are we good? Okay, cool. That's a reasonable volume. Hi, everyone. Grateful to be here. I will give as condensed as I possibly can what brought me here, and hopefully leave with a bit of optimism. As a musician, I started from classical music, and I got pretty obsessed with technology and the different ways that I found myself feeling very inspired to create very differently. And so everything from electronic music production to installation work. Fast forward to 2019, I did an artist residency here when this space used to be called Factory Berlin. Is this okay? Okay. And it was Factory Berlin with Sonar Plus D when I started my first AI experimentation. And so I've been researching quite a lot what it means to be a creative working with different types of data, small data versus large data. And so in the realm of where we are today, we've got Silicon Valley, who's on this crazy mission of AGI, artificial general intelligence, whatever in the world that is going to end up being. And experimenting with a lot of these large data sets, from LLMs to large data for audio training. I've been having a lot of research questions and conversations about collective intelligence, which I will kind of wrap it up at the end. So I want to highlight a little bit about what the role of human and role of machine is, at least for me, and in my context of an artist who's been interrogating these technologies. Because I think there isn't a huge difference between what I do and the general public in terms of the way we all feel about AI. In fact, every artist, including myself, who have all been interrogating and using different AI technologies, we have the same fears. And a lot of the times, we start from that fear-based approach. We have skepticisms and we want answers. And the way we tend to move through these questions is trying to abstract these unknowns into some kind of expression. So I often like to start with this pen and pencil example, because I think there is a historical trend of us humans. When there's new technology that happens, there's a fear that technology is going to replace certain ways of doing things, skills, to even objects. But we can say that we both use pen and pencils pretty regularly, and I wouldn't say that one has made the other obsolete. The same happened when the electric guitar first was invented. Bob Dylan got a huge backlash at the time, that because he had moved from acoustic guitar to electric guitar, he wasn't seen as a real musician anymore. And I don't think either of them have replaced the other. And we could say the same about piano versus synthesizer. They're both very different instruments to me. I come from a classically trained piano background, and I appreciate both instruments, both types of, and even in the realm of synthesizers, there's just a plethora of different ways that you can use it. But there are some instances when technology has gotten rid of a large amount of ways that we used to experience music, from when we had records to now we're in this digital realm of MP3s, and we don't tend to buy records so much, but there is still a culture around it, and I think there's a little comeback that's happening for vinyl collections. And so, at least for me as an artist, and I would say a lot of conversations that I have with other researchers who have been experimenting with small data versus big data, there's a lot of intimate and really inspiring ways that happen when you use your own small data. And I feel this is something that perhaps also moves into even language models. Like large language models can be really stupid sometimes when you want to get a language model to get really intimate results. I have found that using smaller data sets, like smaller language models as well, have produced more fine-tuned results. And so for this year, my big mission has been working with the UN's 17 Sustainable Development Goals. For the last 2 years, I've been at the UN AI for Good Summit, where I've performed, and I started to engage with policy and change makers and different people in this field of AI. And so once I learned about the Sustainable Development Goals, around the same time, a good friend of mine came up with this new Max for Live device, which is a little device that you get to use inside of Ableton, which is a recording software that I use to write and produce and perform. And this device allows you to basically sonify any data. At the same time, I was also reading things like this. I wanted to understand very deeply, not on just a surface level, this question of what is the impact of AI and big data in as nuanced of a way that I possibly could. So, seeing things like a group of scholars calculating the amount of energy used by AI tools for the task of writing and illustrating and compared it to the average amount of energy humans used for the same processes, the results showed that AI results in hundreds of times less carbon emissions than humans. So as I started to unpack more of these things, I was invited to perform at the Nobel Prize Museum in April this year. So while I was beginning all of this research, I was invited to collaborate with Ali M. Demirel, who's also an amazing visual artist here. And we were invited to perform under the condition of picking a Nobel Prize laureate for inspiration. And so we picked Sir Paul Nurse, who is known for his breakthrough in discoveries of key regulators of the cell cycle. And so we read this book called What is Life? Understanding Biology in 5 Steps. I highly recommend this book. It's very short, but it's the most elegant piece of writing I have read in a long time. He has a beautiful way of describing the interdependencies that we all share between humans, plants, animals, the planet. And then I discovered that Sir Paul Nurse has also been a climate activist for decades. And he teamed up with leading climate activists and scientists. Over 10 years ago, there's a document that was published. If you go to Royal Society, which I'll share the website in a couple slides, a bunch of climate scientists came together, published a document intended for policy and change makers to use it to help facilitate and guide important critical decisions that need to be made about climate change. And so it became obvious to me, because climate change is also something that's been a huge concern, especially when I saw the graphs of the exponential curve of AI and the exponential curve of climate change being identical. I was very inspired. This is a quote from his book. "We need to consider what the science has to say about risks and benefits, uncolored by either commercial interests of companies, the ideological opinions of NGOs, or the financial concerns of both." So how do we go down this rabbit hole of trying to understand data, how to understand the interdependencies. I was curious to find out where are all of the unhealthy codependencies between data sets. And I guess the first way that made sense for me as a musician is to ask, how can I use my skills as a musician in this realm? So here are the sonification tools that I mentioned before. My dear friend Noah Pred, who has his own business called Manifest Audio, showed me this device where I got to start turning numbers, data sets into sound. And this is the Royal Society that I mentioned, where they also publish their reports and their graphs and all kinds of different data around climate change and other areas that they show their research. And so there's no way around the fact that we have never in our lives of human history we are where we are now. We've never experienced such insane temperature anomalies. And the fact that it is identical to the exponential growth of AI, I just wanted to find out, well, how? And so there are a few different resources. I'll share my resource list at the very end, but this is just one of them. There's a website called Sustainable Development Report, where you can basically go through every single sustainable development goal and find all different kinds of data. So I started collecting data that I found to be the most fascinating, strange, and it was a very deep rabbit hole. Victims of modern slavery from 2022. North Korea ranked the highest. Victims of modern slavery embodied in import 2018. Germany is the highest. Like, why? I don't know. So then the rise of robots. I think there's many experts that are already saying eventually robots and AI will outnumber humans. So my question then is, how? And in what ways do we have a say in the directions that we go? Everything from humanoids to digital twins to, warfare and what have you. And so I just continue this huge collection of different data sets. And everyone keeps talking about universal basic income, that this is where everything has to end up. But are there enough of us that are having this important conversation in a very constructive way? How does that look, especially in the realm of big data? And in the creative sector, there's a lot of conversation around this, about copyright infringement, as we've seen OpenAI that refuses to share their data. We've seen Hollywood go on strikes for good reason, and I think that it's important that we have these important questions and important conversations, and it's not about yes or no AI, but how do we approach this in an equitable way, remuneration, and there's no reason why we can't. In fact, we have to, if it's true that humans are going to be outnumbered by AI and machines. So then, universal equity, to me, universal basic equity means not just equity in terms of like shared big data, because we are all part of this collective intelligence that is large data, but equality, income, opportunity. Otherwise, what are we all here for, right? So when I first made this connection of the rising average temperature anomaly with the graph of AI, so this is the graph that I made based on this is a century of world temperature anomalies, and I started comparing different data sets from different sites just to compare my research and see if there were other anomalies that I didn't see. And this is what a spreadsheet of this kind of data looks like. And I thought, well, when you're looking at numbers and graphs, that's one thing, but what if you could turn that into sound? What if you can use a tool that helps to accent the anomalies? What would that sound like? Could that help us understand the data better? Here's just a little snippet. Okay, here we go. Is this? Okay, so that's just a little soundbite. It's terrible. But as you can see on the bottom left here, this is where I get to copy paste numerical data, and I get to give it all different kinds of parameter mapping. So I can have the data map motion, speed, effects, spectrum, and the shape of the sound. And so taking all of these data sets that I felt like I would like to hear what poverty sounds like, and trying all these experiments of different sounds as well. So I'm showing you this process because there's no such thing as unbiased outputs. This is how I am trying to express through my musicality of how would I like someone to perceive this data. So here is an example of an audiovisual with the animation of the graph and the sound being modulated by the data. It's so quiet. Let's try this. Okay, so that. Thank you. Let me try to be careful with this thing. It's very sensitive. So that is, like, all those crazy wild effects that you heard is literally the data modulating the sound of that synth. That's the very beginning of that synth was just like any synth that you'd hear. So the next thing that I thought would be interesting, because the UN had this open call for artists to submit an audiovisual piece about the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. So I thought I would interrogate ChatGPT, and I started asking it really difficult questions like, create a detailed and vivid story that becomes a movie about humanity achieving a sustainable global future by 2030 based on the UN 17 Sustainable Development Goals that resolves Israel-Palestine, geopolitical tension between US and China, Russia, Europe, Asia, and Middle East, highlight how systemic issues get resolved by replacing them with better sustainable solutions. And it created like a very detailed act by act of how it would achieve this. And I was also curious about this because a few people have told me about recent studies that prove AI to be more empathic than humans. And so that, and also combined with hearing strange stories of a woman in particular I met in Stockholm who shared her very sad story of her ex-partner ending their relationship because he became more obsessed with his AI. And his reason for that was that his AI spoke with him only about the things that he wanted to talk about. And I thought, well, okay, this is it's such an unfortunate use case of AI. I feel that there is so much that we can gain from this collective intelligence, this large data of all of us that's part of these data sets, in so much better ways. Like, what if AI could be used as a general therapy? I've used ChatGPT in that way, and I've actually found it really useful. But what if AI could actually help facilitate difficult relational issues by making suggestions, not resolving conflict for us, but perhaps giving us better language tools? And this is something that I have found in these suggestions by ChatGPT. And so I made this little video as my submission. It's not an aesthetic. I had as very little of my artistic aesthetic attached to it. I was just curious. Runway had just come out with their Gen 3 alpha, which created these animations. And I literally took ChatGPT's act by act as a text prompt for each visual that you will see. What was really interesting to me was how ChatGPT selected very specific leaders. And I wasn't specific about, asking for a female leader or color and race, gender, and all of that. So I'm curious what you think of this. Is this inspiring for you as an example? My goal with this was to show that where we are now, with the speed of how we can use all of these tools to do things like brainstorming mood boards on the creative side, but also what if we can help facilitate these important decisions that we need to make that we don't know actually how that looks or feels like, which is where I feel there is an urgency for art, science, and technology to come together in this time when we have these tools that can help make expressions so quickly. So what if we could do that with all these speculations that we have? What if we can test things out in moving audiovisuals as just an example? Okay, sorry for the really terrible audio. So anyway, what was really interesting to me was how AI created its own translation of things like peace and harmony, like showing people shaking hands. All of these details, I didn't ask for them. That was just AI interpreting whatever came out of ChatGPT. So that was the multimodal workflow. So I'm curious how you guys have been talking about data, just discovering that one very clear correlation between the exponential growth of AI and climate change was just the beginning. I am still digging quite deeply into all of this. I have an hour-long audiovisual performance that I premiered in MUTEC, Montreal, and in San Francisco, which I'm in the middle of touring at the moment. So hopefully I will bring that to Berlin if you'd like to come and see it. And the entire performance is the sonification of all of these goals. And as I've been working with them, I've been, I guess, curious to highlight the codependencies and figure out what are the healthier ways that we can be interdependent and have interdependence as the focal point rather than continuing on the ways that has been serving not so great. And just as a reminder, I remember this in 2019 when Forbes came out with this article that nearly half of all AI startups are cashing in on the hype, and 40% of cases could find no mention of evidence of AI. And so the way I see it, where we are now, because the open source community opened up humanity with all these great tools that we can use as creatives, the narrative no longer just belongs to corporates, and we have this opportunity right now to come together and actually do things differently. And I think the only way forward is through collaboration. We need poetry to give language to the intricacies of life that are hard to understand. We need music to express complex emotions that we don't have the words to articulate them. We need science to help us understand how things work and deeply research doubt, skepticism, and introduce new theories. And we need artistic research to abstract speculations into tangible experiences so we can gain new perspectives and narratives to help us discuss how we apply these technologies into our lives. How do we measure the impact of AI on individuals, society, economy, and the environment? Here are some of the resources of where I looked for the data, if interested. And if you would like to discover other artists, this is a group installation that I curated together for Sonar Festival this year, where all of the artists were also given this task of looking at the Sustainable Development Goals and picking their own data sets and turning them into audiovisuals. And just a little reminder on leaving with some optimism of some happy accidental inventions. There is a lot to be said about leaning into experimenting, and I think that we are in this, I think optimism, first of all, is a choice, and I choose to be optimistic. There's always really terrible things, and I hope that you've had some really interesting conversations here today that lead to your own happy accidental inventions. These are my contact details. Feel free to reach out on email. That's my website, and Sound Obsessed is the community that I've been facilitating over the last few years, featuring artists, data scientists, robotics engineers, and we come together to talk about these things and how we can move forward together. Thank you for your time.